that yet.
Hey yo guys, so this is probably the final build update until we get a new patch in PoE. In summary, this build has fully cleared all existing content with relative ease, with the exception of ritual and expedition bosses, because the RNG access to it is super fun and engaging. So in a nutshell, we cleared Zesht, Arbiter, and Simulacrum at +4. We can clear any maps. We have not cleared expedition or ritual bosses, simply because we cannot get access to them because RNG hates us. But this build can do everything easily. If you want to see the build in action, check out my channel. I got videos on each specific endgame mechanic. I've also got a question from my viewers. Would you guys like to see an ESB cast on Minion Death version? Let me know in the comments. You may ask, what's ESB? Well, stay tuned till the end and find out. I'm gonna try to keep this video short, so we'll only cover the recent changes. I also provide a POB link in the description. This is what we're going to be covering today. Skip to the relevant sections for what you're interested in, and let's get straight to it. So this section is for you guys who've seen my previous build videos. I'm only going to cover the recent changes. So first, for bosses, we've made some changes. So we're now using skill duration to try and use the time freeze ability better. It allows us to time freeze for 12 seconds. At the same time, we're also using soul offering instead of sigil of power. Soul offering is now giving us like 60% spell power for 15 seconds. So this is the most recent change related to the bossing. For defenses, the only real change is now we're using Eternal Youth. But the idea for defenses is basically you get resistance cap, you stack life, then you choose either Ghostwrite or Aziri's Disdain. You add Eternal Youth, so your flasks can recover energy shield, and this is your whole defense setup. You don't need to do anything else. And finally, for damage, we're using Killjoy, Trample Toe, and Frostwall. These three together allow you to one-shot every single thing in the game. I mean, tier 4, full party stacked groups, bosses, and things like that. Everything gets one shot. And here is a little sneak peek of you when you try this build. Yes, you will be bored. It will kill the game for you. But these are the main changes. So we haven't changed much in the gems or passives. We've just made a few tweaks here and there. We're still using time freeze with life tap and persistence for higher duration. Here is how much time freeze duration we have right now, and when we change to weapon set 2, it goes up to almost 12 seconds. I'll cover that in the passives, but this is partially because of the increased skill effect duration on the shield. So time freeze. Then we have fireball with quality, that's running scatter shot, mobility, arcane tempo, unbreakable, and wild shards. Unbreakable is an amazing thing to add because it prevents you from getting stunned while casting fireball, and that's the only skill we're actually casting ourselves. Raging spirits, also max quality level 4 with feeding frenzy, minion instability, infernal legion, magnified effect. First cast on minion death, quality as well with comet, that also has quality, spell echo, impetus, energy retention, and inspiration. Second cast on minion death with frostwall, also quality for the gem, spell cascade, glaciation, icicle, electrocute. So we can also build electrocution as well as freeze, as its auto casting is. This is just nice to have, more safety. This is an open slot for anything you want to use. I use frostwall, but you can use any skill here with cold penetration, overcharge, cold exposure, lightning exposure, and strip away, just to apply exposures on bosses. Grim Feast, clarity, blink with second wind, ingenuity, and wind wave. All of these are max quality. Then blasphemy with hyperthermia, cannibalism, ritualistic curse, and cold mastery. So we want cold mastery at level 25. Hypothermia gets 38% increase. So if we remove the cold, hyperthermia only has 37. So this 1% is useful. Also, by adding cannibalism to blasphemy, cannibalism requires less reservation because this reduced reservation actually applies to the support gem as well. And then finally, the newest addition, soul offering with these support gems, and I only use this for bosses to get the buff, so that's what weapon set 2 is for. We go into it, we use Soul Offering, and then we get a buff for spell power. For the gear, still using the same wand with extra damage, mana, cold spells, critical chance, and cast speed. New helmet for more resistances. You want a scepter with as much spirit, mana, strength, mana regen, intelligence, and presence of area effect. Rings. Then Killjoys, Trample Toes, which these two solve any damage issues, and Ghostwrite to solve any survivability issues. Essentially, if you take these three items, this is the build. Fill everything else to fit as you need. Actually, the FireFlower as well. Everything else can be replaced by anything you have and just slowly build up to it. But these are the essentials. Killjoy is also optional. These three are just more than enough. As for passives, we haven't made many changes. Key things to note: we're using stun threshold here. We're using stun threshold here. New addition is the Metamorphosis Diamond, so we can grab these cheaply without wasting all the points here. We're also getting the Arcane Blossom and the Self-Mortification. The rest is as usual, crit chance. Also, Eternal Youth, new addition, very nice. We can basically use our flask to charge Energy Shield. I've also gotten rid of the points here, but I still have Energize due to this diamond, which has Energize and Cold Nature. Cold Nature is here, which adds 25% extra damages for cold, and most of our damage is cold. These are also quite important points because the extra cast speed helps get the fireballs out faster. The rest is the same. The jewels are also more or less the same. I have an updated POB link with this build and all the jewels and everything set up as it is. Notice the weapon set 2 points here, here, and here. These are all for increased skill duration. And for weapon set 2, we're using 1 point here, and the rest for crit nodes and damage nodes. This build does not require Chronomancer, but the current version is tailored for the strengths of Chronomancer. This build does work on any class or ascendancy as long as you use FireFlower and Necromantic Talisman passive. So for defenses, you need to make sure that your resistance capped and you have at least 5.5k EHP, which is your life and energy shield. Anything below 5.5k is going to be noticeable, and you can push this above to 6k, 7k if you want to increase your survivability. Chaos resistance is nice, but if you play smart, you can play with less than 75% when starting out mapping, so you don't need to focus on chaos resistance capping as long as you're capped on all the other ones. Generally speaking, you should always analyze your death. Most often you die from one of these 5, either not enough damage, not enough survivability, you get stunned to death, you do a dumbass gamer move, for example blinking into mobs, or you simply can't dodge boss mechanics. You should always figure out which one of these is the problem and then try fix it. This build, however, has 3 oh shit buttons. One is Time Freeze, Temporal Rift, and Blink. So using both Blink and Temporal Rift, you have great mobility, as well as oh shit buttons. However, if you add Now and Again passive with 33% not consuming cooldowns, this means that sometimes you can Time Freeze multiple times back to back, Temporal Rift back to back, and Blink back to back. This means that you have more than 3 oh shit buttons, very often 6, 7, or even higher than that. Depends on the 33% chance. Also keep in mind that this 33% chance of no cooldown also applies to the Frostwall. And yes, cast on Minion Death still uses cooldown on Frostwall. And that cooldown is actually shared between the manual and the automatic cast on Minion Death wall. So if you manually use all of your cooldowns for Frostwall, the cast on Minion Death will not summon one until there's at least 1 charge. So keep that in mind when you're setting up for bosses. Both cast on Minion Death and manual Frostwall acts as a kind of taunt. It's useful for both high density swarms, and sometimes it helps clump up high density packs together so that the comet destroys them in one shot. Now for offenses during mapping, both Frostwall and Trample Toes together provide you with more than enough damage for most things, as long as your comet is doing moderate 30-40k sheet damage. It still works with less, but you'll just be a bit slower. So as your damage increases, your speed will increase, but this works with even less sheet damage than 30-40k. But that's something I would start as your initial goal. If you still lack damage, which is mostly going to be noticeable for bosses, just add Killjoy Gloves. So if you change the combo to Frost Wall, Trample Toes plus Killjoy Gloves, that's going to be enough damage to one-shot everything, including +4 Arbiter, Zesht, Simulacrum. You can see my channel for videos on that. Typical mapping experience goes something like this. You walk a few steps, you cast Fireball. Unbreakable support gem is amazing for this because we are only casting Fireball, so that when we're casting Fireball, the chances of us getting stunned is even lower. And you also don't need to hold down the Fireball spam. So take a step, cast the Fireball, take another step, cast again, maybe blink, cast again. You get the kind of idea. Always be moving, always be casting, and the screen will get wiped. Once the Raging Spirits die, everything on your screen should die. Then you collect loot, rinse and repeat. That's general gameplay for mapping. Now for bosses, this is somewhat different. Most easier bosses don't need any preparation. You just spam Fireball and they die from the cast on Minion Death, spamming both Comet and Frost Walls. But for endgame +4 difficulty bosses, you might need some setting up. Depends on your gear and damage. The setup is relatively simple. While the boss is untargetable and in an animation, you activate Soul Offering with the weapon set 2, which lasts about 14-second duration. You then set up 1 to 3 Frost Walls around the boss in a way that the walls do not overlap nor touch the boss. You don't want the walls to get destroyed by the boss as the boss becomes targetable. So what that means in practice, if you have a boss that's spawning here and it's untargetable, and you are somewhere here, what you need to do is you need to cast the Frost Wall in a way that surrounds the boss without overlapping with the boss. So for example, something like this. This boss is still untargetable. Then as the boss becomes targetable, you activate Time Freeze, which will freeze the boss for about 12 seconds. This is also using weapon set 2. And then once the boss is frozen, with Frost Wall surrounding him, you cast the Fireball, which will then summon Raging Spirits, and then Raging Spirits will die, which will cause comets to start raining down. As the comets start falling down, they will break the Frost Wall, and then the overkill damage from the Frost Wall will one-shot the boss. It is really as simple as that. However, sometimes this setup does not work, and it fails to one-shot the boss. Here is some insights to why that happens. The wall sometimes gets destroyed by something other than the comet. If the wall has bad placement, or for example, the boss breaks the wall with its body by moving it, or maybe your Fireball level is too high and it destroys the Frost Wall before the comet lands. If this happens, you can either manually cast the Frost Wall or let cast on Minion Death do its thing. But then you're slightly dependent on the RNG. And the reason for this is, when the wall gets summoned, occasionally it gets destroyed by something other than Comet. Even with bad RNG, usually within about 2 to 3 cast on Minion Death loops, you will get a wall and Comet to proc overkill and one-shot the boss. If this happens and you didn't one-shot the boss immediately before it could move after Time Freeze, you very often can Time Freeze again, which will last less, but gives you another 6 seconds to one-shot the boss. And if that's not enough, then I guess you're gonna have to play the boss mechanics and dodge for a little bit. So I've been asked this question many times. What do I actually play myself? Since I make changes all the time, rarely playing the same thing for more than a day, I'm always looking for different things to try to see what sticks and what doesn't. But I thought that maybe sharing what I play during each stage of the game might be useful to some viewers. So for early game, when you start mapping and tier 1 to tier 15 maps, I was using the first build video version, which worked perfectly fine for the stage. I then started transitioning to mid-game, where I was doing Citadel bosses, tier 15, level 80 to 82 maps, which is when I upgraded to the early update version, and as well as started incorporating Magic Find. And then finally, for late game, I played this version that I'm sharing right now, plus Magic Find, because once I've tasted the profits from having Magic Find on my gear, I realized that it's a must-have for every version. So that's what I'm trying to incorporate going forward. So around mid-game is when I decided I needed more currency, and that's when I transitioned into the Magic Find version. You can see my channel for the video guide. My currency drops increased massively after I made the switch, and I haven't looked back since. Considering everything I learned till today, I would highly recommend going for Magic Find as soon as possible, maybe even as soon as early game, if you can still get all your resistances and gear in check. Now finally, to answer the long-awaited question, what did I play most recently? That would be the Cast on Minion Death ESB version plus Magic Find. So it's around 130 to 150% Magic Find currently. And now you may ask, what's ESB? So I've been wanting to test some different builds and versions, and I really enjoy playing around and making changes. I probably spend more time making changes than actually playing. And because recently I've gotten a bit bored of the cast on Minion Death, I was planning to change it to a completely different Frost Projectile build. But after some quick searching, I realized that there are already a few similar options out there, and it's nothing new or exciting, at least for the current patch. So then I thought to myself, hey, why not just make cast on Minion Death faster at clearing maps? Because that is the main issue at the moment with the build, that it could be faster at clearing maps. So until I get completely bored of the current patch, I thought, let me try and make the cast on Minion Death faster at clearing maps, specifically clearing maps. So while I was trying to do just that, I recalled a comment from one of my viewers, and thus the ESB cast on Minion Death was born. ESB stands for Epileptic Seizure Build. Why? Well, because it runs at around 1 to 5 FPS with my newly upgraded 4080 Super. So if your hardware is anything less than that, you will probably not be able to play this at all. So if you'd like to see more of this build, let me know in the comments, like and subscribe, do the YouTube things. And now I'm gonna cue a short sneak peek introduction of the gameplay for the Cast on Minion Death ESB. Thank you for taking your time to watch this video, guys. I hope you found it helpful. Now, I'd like to hear from you. Help me improve by sharing your thoughts, what you like and dislike, and simply letting me know in the comments. Your feedback will help me create better videos in the future. Whether it's suggesting a new build, different format, make sure you let me know. So take a moment to leave a comment, and don't forget to press the like and subscribe button and do the YouTube things. Thanks again, and peace.